I'm Brianna Brown Keene. So my married name is Brianna Brown Keene. And as an author and coach and with a bunch of other things, I go by Keene. As an actor, professionally, I've gone by my maiden name since I started when I was 19. I have been in the business for, God, almost 25 years professionally. I've been auditioning since I sort of was starting at 14, but I really didn't start till I was about 18, 19. And then I came to Los Angeles at 19 from Minnesota. I was suburbs of Minnesota. Oh, you know. And I didn't ever speak like that. Actually, neither of my parents were from Minnesota, so I didn't have to
Okay.
I didn't have to
Yeah.
get rid of some like Norwegian dialect. But so yeah, so I was really sorry, my alarm just went off for this. Let me make sure I turn it off. If you can, okay. I won't interrupt us again.
Oh, that's right. It happens all the time.
I'm like, "Oh, that's my alarm to make sure I'm on this," even though I knew I was gonna be on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started when I was 19 from Minnesota. I mean, do you want me to dive into, like, how I started? Where do we wanna go? Because it's like I said, it's a simple question, and it's like,
Oh, yeah.
it could take a 45 minutes.
So, I mean, we usually start with that. I feel like you've told your story, so much through different podcasts as well. So I'd say maybe we could even start, everyone who's started as a kiddo has, auditioned for community theater and done that sort of thing. So I'm really intrigued about, you going from Minnesota to Los Angeles, basically right out of high school, I would think,
Yeah.
and just diving into the journey. So I was like asking, what was going through your head as far as what you expected of LA when you were coming out or when you were going out there compared to what was actually happening? I mean, there's always those tales of, yeah, I'm going to go out. Either they want to be a star or they're not really knowing what's going to happen and then just things sort of occur. So, yeah, I'm just intrigued to see where your mindset was.
Okay, so I think my story is a little bit unique in that, um, I had a feeling, a knowing that I wanted to be an actor when I was 14. And I went through the yellow pages. Yes, I am dating myself. The yellow pages, there was no internet. And I was looking for agencies in Minnesota. Now, the funny part is I'd never I'd never been in a play. So, it was a very interesting thing that I had auditioned for a bunch of middle school plays. I had total stage fright. I couldn't like sing or speak beyond the page. Didn't make any of them. By the way, not competitive. Not competitive.
No.
And no. I did start to sing more in high school, and like I was brought up to like the sophomore year choir when I was a freshman. Um, but I had this like knowing that I wanted to get into acting, even though I'd never done it. And I'd done like a little thing, like teeny tiny, like summer camp thing, for like 2 weeks, when I was in elementary school until middle school. But it made no sense. But I had this knowing I need to look. And so I look into representation. So I went through this yellow page and I started cold calling agencies in Minnesota about how do you get into acting. And so, some of them talked to me a little bit, but I basically figured out like, oh, you need to submit headshots and, this is how you get in at this time and blah, blah, blah. And so I just kept track and then kept calling and figuring out when I would do that. Now, around ish that same time, I had a choir teacher, her student teacher, they really encouraged me to be in the school musical to audition. And that was actually very competitive. And I was one of the um, few freshmen to get into that play. And I was a chorus. It wasn't like I got the lead. And, like, but I was like so excited. I got to be, in the background
Yeah.
singing for My Fair Lady. And then I was like, I kept submitting and resubmitting and finding like, how could I find representation? And by the time I was in my high school year, where I actually was doing plays, uh, the one of the women who later became a friend and later became a manager, she saw my resume or my saw my headshot and she thought, I wonder if she can act. And she looked it over. She saw that I went to a good school. She called me in to come in to talk to me. And the fact that I was willing to go in on one like my day off from school, she was impressed by that. She was impressed by my tenacity. And so I sat down and talked to her and said, I want to be an actor. Like, how do you go about doing that? And I mean, I knew nothing. Now, again, this is pre-YouTube. So now we can learn everything by, Siri, how do I become an actor?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
ChatGPT, send them my resume. And, I mean, we have so much at our fingertips now, but I did not know anything. And I knew no one who'd ever made a living as an artist, let alone as an actor. I had a second cousin that was out in Los Angeles who I'd never met and barely even heard of. Like, so that wasn't even in my reference guide of like, well, she can do it. Like, that wasn't like a thought.
Yeah.
Um, so this woman had took a liking to me. I started auditioning. She hooked me up with this other woman, Nancy Kramer, who was my manager for many years. And together they like helped manage me. And then I started auditioning by videotape. Again, totally dating myself. Videotape and for Los Angeles. And again, this is like when nationwide casting was like really, you know, shooting in Atlanta, or you can be a Chicago actor and audition like that. There wasn't self tapes, any of those sorts of things. Um, the taping was recorded at the casting director's office, and she had a relationship with specifically Iris Burton, who
Mm,
is no longer with us, but who she had huge young stars, Joaquin Phoenix, Amy Adams, Josh Hartnett, Kirsten Dunst. Like a lot of them had come from the Midwest. And so I was being, you know, I don't know what the right word is. I don't want to say groomed because I
right, yeah, there's a negative connotation there.
I was being groomed. No, but
Modeled?
I was being, kind of prepared. I think that's a
Yeah.
better, less funky connotation. Prepared for that journey, and I started auditioning a lot by videotape and getting callbacks. And I tested for a movie in Calgary. It was a big movie with Chevy Chase at the time, and it was like, oh my god! And they had wanted me to come out to Los Angeles for pilot season because I was doing so well back when there were pilot seasons.
Right.
Um, and so I did that, and I took some time off from college. I specifically went to St. Olaf College because of their music program, but I knew I was also going to be auditioning,
Mm,
so it needed to be close by to downtown Minneapolis, and so I decided I have this one opportunity. I will regret it if I don't try. I had this knowing when I was walking through my college campus that if I don't try, I'll just end up marrying somebody I went to college with, having kids, and always just have this regret that I never like did it. And
yeah.
so even though I was really scared and my parents were not, they were and were not supportive, right? Like my mom knew if we don't let her do this, she's an adult, but she'll do it anyway and it could be problematic. So they were like, okay, go. But it was definitely that was more of an incubated situation where I was driven to my auditions and I was kind of helped, along the way. It was only for 2 months. It was for a pilot season, but I did well. I booked my first. Became SAG. I booked the first line in Freaks and Geeks pilot. And I did like one other episode of that later. But I did this movie in Romania and I booked like a commercial. And they were like, "Oh my God, you need to move here," and that was also like I didn't really know what it would be. So when you say like, what did I think Los Angeles would be? I had no idea. I just knew I had to try and see what it would become. And after I did the movie in Romania, and this is this family film in Romania, I was like, I need to go home. I was homesick, and then I really had to figure out what I was going to do because it was. I always kind of thought like, well, I'm going to finish college. You just that's I was a total bookworm, I was very scholastic, and I was like, I don't see myself not having that be a thing, and, I decided, I remember after several months being home, all right, I am going to move out and I'm going to figure it out. And I sublet from this girl who had also kind of lived in this, coddled situation with our managers. I sublet her place with a couple other, seemingly adults, but older than me. I was 19. And I remember my first day in Los Angeles, it couldn't have been a polar opposite of when I'd been in Los Angeles before. So I get into
Mhm.
Los Angeles, my mom, we find where my place is. I can't get my keys, which was weird, but not apparently not a red flag for my mom, but
Hmm.
anyway, I was in an area that wasn't great. It's now fine, but like at the time it was sketchy. And again, I'm coming from like the suburbs of Minnesota, this is I was not very city street smart. But I learned that very fast. And, I couldn't get in. I had all my stuff in my car that I had bought. Uh and I had to find a job, and my parents were like, you can go do this, but sink or swim.
Ah,
So my mom, I took her to the airport. I finally was able to get my key, which I think was done by design because the place it was not cute. It was a bit
oh
of a
no.
and so I'm bringing everything by myself into my apartment with there was a mattress on the floor and these janky drawers and that were broken of a dresser. And I mean, I was so cold at night. I remember I had to ask my manager for a blanket because I couldn't afford to buy one. Um, I started off then, working as a barista at Starbucks. So you never know. Be nice to people. Be nice to
Right?
people.
Exactly. Exactly.
Be nice to
Especially
people,
those who
and
serve you.
yeah, and also don't tell women to smile. It's super obnoxious. The number of people who would say, "Smile, smile." I wanted to be like, "You smile," you
Right?
know?
Yeah, exactly.
But, maybe they were trying to say like, "Hey, you seem wildly unhappy." I don't know.
You would hope, right? That would be the
I think it was
background of them saying that.
I don't know, hopefully. Anyway, but it was, I digress. So yeah, so then I had to find a job and I was like, well, I'll be a barista. And I started auditioning and figuring all that out. But it went from kind of a coddled situation to now I need to adult. And before the word adulting was even considered a thing, at 19, and then really figure out, how do I afford acting class? How do I pay my bills? I mean, I'd never done any of these things. So it was a lot to learn in a very fast period of time, and there were periods I almost drowned, and was definitely around circumstances of like, "Oh, this does not align with my values, and I need to find another group," but it took a while, but I figured it out.
And you went on from there. I think that is honestly, that might be one of the more interesting parts of your journey is that you had that not preconceived notion of LA, but you had that education, with the incubator that you were in. But then you learn more when you're kind of thrown over the fire, right? You learn so much. So I mean, the second you moved out there, you were working as barista, you're going out on auditions, booking some jobs. When did you start to feel like this could become I don't want to say lucrative, but a stable career as far as at least I can get my rent, and then 6 months maybe I don't work, then I work again, and then that whole feast and famine
Right.
thing.
Right. I think the luxury of me having done so well on videotape gave me a lot of confidence. I had a lot of confidence going into rooms that I was very green and very not prepared for, but I would make bold choices. And so I think that got me far. I think when I actually moved to Los Angeles and suddenly realized how much I didn't know, you're like, oh, like I have no craft. Or I have no technique to my craft. I had to learn craft. I had to learn
Yeah.
technique. I had to learn auditioning. I had to learn all these things at a on a versus more instinct. And that took a while. And also I knew I could make money at it because I already had. So I
Yeah.
always knew that the thing that was holding me back was me. And I think that was totally to my benefit because I think a lot of people have an idea of like, well, what's holding me back is this, or this is what's holding me back. And then one is a victim to the circumstance versus what can I do? And so since I was a voracious reader and very much about continued education. And I had a lot of things in my life that I had earned or achieved, but it was through a lot of hard work, right? Like I had where I was played soccer, but I was on the C team and I sucked. And then I, worked really hard. And then I was starter on the A team and then got asked to like play an above league. So I had this grit and tenacity and knowledge of how to work really hard and smart to like get really good at something. And so I took that way of being and I applied it to acting.
Mm.
And so even though I was first a barista and then I ran food at a restaurant, uh, thinking that would be good because the hours weren't as early as a waitress or whatever my logic was at this restaurant where I hurt my back and then I was on disability. So that took a huge side swipe of like, oh my God, I'm now told I'll never run again. I'm now told like I'm having this physical, issue. It hurt to like lift things up. Like I was like, I don't know what to do. My parents, well, they love me. They did nothing. And I think they were very much like, come home.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out not just how to act, but I was like, I need to figure out how to make a living, especially when I wasn't able to work and be on disability, which that's a whole other system that's I'm now privy to, and learning how to like manage all that and be going out for auditions and do uh, and so I fortunately used that as an opportunity to learn about how to heal my body. Like I healed myself from this back injury where, again, I was told I'd never run again. I had just 3 bulge discs in my back
Ooh.
and in my neck. And so I just was laser focused, and that was something that I always kind of had an ability. I think being a little OCD, I was really good at being like obsessive about something. And that was a superpower and being like, okay, I'm going to be obsessive into figuring this out. Obsessive into figuring this out. And so I just wouldn't stop until I figured it out.
Yeah.
I just would figure it out. And the same thing with like as acting, I would figure out the right acting class or realize like, oh my God, I was running into so many crazy acting teachers that all thought that they knew everything and so many of them were insane. And then finally learning a bunch of techniques that were really confusing and conflicting, and then finding a couple places that were like, I was like, okay, this can be my home base for now. Um, but not getting too comfortable because I didn't want to just be a professional student. I mean, I want to be a professional
Mhm.
student in life, but I didn't want to be one of the actors who's like, they think they're acting, but they're just acting in acting class. And
Yeah.
I saw that when I was 19 when I went and visited, an acting class with someone I knew that was older, and she's, this guy, this acting teacher, he, would help Al Pacino, and he was, amazing. And I went to that class, and again, I'm 19, I don't know anything, but I knew even though everyone's work was really beautiful, no one worked. I was
Mm.
like, I literally had a knowing, no one in here books jobs. I was like,
Yeah.
nobody should be working on a scene for 6 months. That's crazy. That is not
That
preparing you for auditions.
that's ridiculous. 6 months?
Or whatever it was. It was
I
insane.
mean,
It was an absurd amount of time, and then I started
yeah.
paying attention to, I'm like, what if you're just trying to, like, pay your mortgage, pay your kids' private school, and you're not necessarily giving, like, great business, advice or the reality of, like, "Hey, if you really want this, like, you need to work really hard, or you should, cut your losses and go do something else. Like, save yourself a heartbreak in your late 30s or 40s," like,
You're right.
not gonna do it, like, do yourself a favor and, like,
Yeah.
and so that was part of my journey as well, but I think also what helped is when I was younger, I started facilitating artist way groups with my manager's clients and then with some friends, and, like, that need for community and to be focused on being an artist and focused on, what eventually became goal setting, and, uh I'd facilitated groups and like drug ed groups and was a youth leader in high school, and then facilitating those groups in my like early 20s, and then later in my mid to late 20s I started a mastermind goal group which evolved into both a nonprofit and I created a book a book on it and a
Oh my
coaching
god.
program around it, and
Yeah.
literally I took like what I saw worked and didn't work, not just for me, but for other artists and entrepreneurs, and how to like have a solid base with the consistent inconsistencies. and how to keep seeing like, oh, I am having forward movement, even if I'm not booking a pilot that got greenlit, right? That I can still not wanna, like, be devastated on the floor because my friend got a job I didn't get. Like, how
Yeah.
can I see what I am doing? And, I created this based on, like, what I needed and then seeing other goal setting tools that I felt didn't necessarily make sense for as our life changes and as an artist, we need to be both a business person and an artist and and a nutritionist and a stylist and
Everything.
you have to like learn lots of things.
Yeah.
You're like, I just want to play pretend. You're like, cool, have fun being a CEO. So
Oh my god, yeah.
so that is really like the tool and also the community that I built that helped me feel anchored in a really crazy industry and also just to attract and be around like-minded people, so then I wasn't in chaos because, I'm a big believer in, you you attract where you're at, right? So,
Yeah.
um, and I remember when I forgot to mention that, like, I tell a fundraising after I hurt my back, and so that was interesting, and, I remember someone saying, like, "You are who you surround yourself with," and I looked around and no offense to all of them, but I was looked around, I was like, "I gotta work really hard." Like, I gotta get out of here. I got a lot to learn, so then, again, I use that OCD
That
laser
tunnel
focus.
vision. Yeah.
And then I booked
What
a really big commercial, and, that is what launched me into being like, "Alright, now I'm just gonna do it." Back when commercials
Yeah.
made money.
I'm not gonna say anything about that currently.
Yeah. People don't make money anymore.
Right,
They
yeah, well, I mean, I fell into this part of the industry because I wanted to go into video production. Having grown up, maybe the biggest idol I had, at least performance-wise, was Chris Farley as a kid, and never thought about acting at all, just kind of fell into it.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I also grew up around, seeing that, oh, this person made $100,000 on their commercial. Like, oh, well, sweet. That sounds wonderful. Not the case anymore, unfortunately. But I do
No.
want to ask, what is the name of your book? Because I'm almost 13 years into this journey, and I feel like I'm getting that forward momentum, post 30. I'm turning 32 next month.
Awesome.
And it just, you start to gather those thoughts about yourself and about your performances and about who you are as an artist. So I need to read the book. So
All
what is
right.
your
Well,
book
I will
called?
send it to you. I'll totally send it to you. Just send me your address and I'll send it to you. I'll gift it to you. It's
Oh,
called
thank you.
Manifesting Your Mission. It's a
Manifesting your mission.
guidebook. And so I have a website called manifestingyourmission.org. And speaking of what I created during the pandemic, I actually created a 12-week coaching program for people, not just actors, but for a lot of entrepreneurs and anyone really, using the guidebook and then just accountability coaching. And then I also I saw just a lot of people flailing, and I thought, well, I mean, as an actor who's like in between gigs, you you have to have other things that you're doing. I'm like, okay, well,
Yep.
this sucks. We're being locked down. We have to wear masks, and we have to stay on 6 feet away from everyone. But like, what can you do? What can I do? Right.
Yeah.
So I then was like, well, let me create a 12-week program because I'd already done some workshops and I'd already spoken on it. I had a keynote speech that I had been given that I really kind of started when I was pregnant to just have things to do when you're like, I can't act right now because it's like you have the plague when you're pregnant.
Oh no.
No one wants to hire anyone who's pregnant, which is a whole other thing. Uh, but I took the guidebook that I'd used within my main mastermind group and, within the nonprofit that I have, the New Hollywood, and for the accountability program that, like, we actually support formerly homeless moms who went through Harvest Home, so we're their alumni program. So I already had all of these tools and background, and I'm also one of those people, like if a friend comes to me and they're saying, "Oh, I'm having trouble with XYZ," I have a really hard time not being like, "Okay, so here's a podcast, here's a documentary, I read this book, this article, do this one first, here's why." And like it just like kind of spitballs to me. And, so I try to zip it unless a friend asks, but my friends that love and care about me, if they come to me for something, they know I'm gonna be like, "All right, here's what we do." And so
Yeah.
I took all of those things and skills and, background, and I created a 12-week program, and then I created on like, private coaching as well, and it's really fun, because I can do it remote. So if I'm traveling out of town, or, if I'm shooting out of town, or my husband's shooting out of town and we're all gone, I can do it and, make it make sense. And I just love connecting with people, and I love people becoming their best version of themselves. And you know, it's like relooking at hardship as opportunities.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
god, I love that. Yeah, especially, in this day and age, we could use more of that than
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah.
Let's get together. Yeah.
I think we are so much more powerful than we realize. And we are who we surround ourselves with. And so, be conscious of that. And then also, what we think we are capable of is really limited by who we surround ourselves with. So if we're surrounding ourselves with people who believe that things are possible, that we deserve to get to create things, and that are not in a victim mentality, I think there's a real cancer of victimhood,
Mhm.
which keeps people very stuck. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that certain things of it aren't accurate, but when people maintain that as part of their identity, then they're not as willing, to see other avenues. Like, I see a lot of actors, I also have a thriving community for actors that I do with my girlfriend, who's and has been a top executive casting director, and she's a life coach. I don't know if you know her,
Mm,
Elizabeth Boykovich, but she's awesome. And
familiar, yeah.
we did several workshops online. We spoke at USC, and then we created a community called Thriving Community, because we just saw the need for artists to want to have basically what I had created almost 20 years ago, but like a younger version, like a different version. Our version is talking about, you know, they have different goals. They've achieved a lot of things, so they have different things they're working on. Whereas this group is, a lot more in their 20s and 30s, and wanting to just up level and create their own material, and also have, um, a better way to navigate the artistry and the business of the business that is an art in and of itself to navigate. So, so I have a thing called Thriving Community that's also listed on my website, Manifesting Your Mission. And I just have all of these fun things that I've created along the way to keep myself interested. I'm a creator. I love
Yeah.
to create things that I think are
You
valuable.
well, I mean, with all that you've made it so I've had to ask very minimal questions for this interview because it seems like we are connected as far as, this or that. A lot of the questions that I ask are always sort of revolving around how to navigate outside of the gig, outside of the job. And it's, something that I will continue to learn throughout the rest of my life, just as you would, just as anybody would.
Yeah.
Um, but we do hang on to things that, either someone's told us or we've read or we've experienced throughout our creative career. And I will say really quick before I get to that question is, you are one of the sort of the cornerstones or the staples of me getting into this industry in the first place.
Oh,
Just like in a weird way, 2004 was a crazy year because I caught your performances in both Smallville, Entourage, and Spider-Man 2. And at
uh-huh.
that point, the only knowledge I had about acting was, oh, you have people that play, one type of role throughout their entire career. But you were, one of the first faces I saw as someone that could, sort of captivate and take over various characters, and just a whole myriad of archetypes essentially. So I
Mhm.
did want to thank you for that. And that's another reason why I wanted to talk with you and hear your stories because I've always gone through this career going, you know what? I look back on these folks who are, working today, built a very sort of diverse and fluid career and are just always trying to change up. So that is my little soapbox I wanted to deliver really quick before I get to the pertinent question, which is if you've had any piece of advice that maybe somebody's, passed along to you or you sort of just held on to, it doesn't have to be acting related, but maybe has helped you in your career that you would love to share with our listeners? Anything that sort of kept you going?
Oh, well, I mean, so many things, so many things. I mean, I remember when I was on, and first of all, thank you for saying that. I try to do different things, and I think, you have to often create and show that you can do different types of roles. You know, a lot of times, people thought like, oh, you can just play blonde cheerleader girl or whatever it was when I was younger, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the irony is like, oh, I wasn't popular growing up. I definitely wasn't a cheerleader and I didn't come from money. And so then to embody all of those things and be like, oh yeah, that's what I play. It's like this is a character. But or certain things that, it's like, oh, well, that's who you are. Or like we're like, oh, you're that, sexualized, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I had to like learn how to access that because I shut that down when I was younger. I was like, don't look at me, don't like, so much of what I did was acting because I wanted to play characters. I come from the theater. Like you don't play yourself. Like and suddenly when I started acting class and they're like, play yourself, I'm like, oh, that's boring. I'm like,
Right.
give me an accent, give me a limp, do something, right? Like, but so I've always tried to keep it interesting. I think, the best advice that I'll say advice I would give and advice I've been given. The advice that I've been given that was actually really hit me was by an older actress who'd been on General Hospital, and she pulled me aside at this fan event, and she's just like, just make sure you always, and she was almost like it was almost kind of like a coven thing, like, "Come here, come over here, let me tell you a secret around the cauldron." She's like, "Just make sure you always have something to, be passionate about." And she said, "For me, it's pottery." And I just sat there and listened to her. And then she looked at me and she said, "And don't fuck up your face." And then there was a woman who walked up. I thought it was the funniest thing. And then there was a woman who walked up to us who clearly had like a long time ago. I'm talking about she must have been in her 60s and this was, I don't know, 10 years ago. But she clearly had been like the ingenue, the leading lady, and she had done God knows what she'd done to herself. And she came and said hi to the woman I was speaking to, and then the woman walked off and she looks at me and she goes, "See?" And I was just like, "Okay, note taken." Fuck up my face. I thought that was really funny, but I heard it. I really heard it. And then the other advice I got from some other people was, don't hesitate to have kids.
Okay, that's a good
I
one.
think that that's a big one, especially for women, where it's like, oh, well, I'll have them later, 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 and then suddenly later never happens. And for some women don't want that, and that's totally fine. But if it is something for a man or a woman, or however you identify, if you want children, to be aware that there is a timeline and and to be smart about it so you're not screwed or having to spend tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and have a child. So being aware of that, I thought that was like, I remember at 30 I had a nutritionist said, well, you should start getting your body ready and think about having kids, and I was just like, huh? I need to book a pilot. I was like, what? But I'm glad she planted the seed because it got me to think and be really efficient within the next 5 years of my life.
Absolutely.
Right. So that was,
Yeah.
so my advice, I think take all of that advice. It's great. It was influential to me. But I think my advice is, and I have a lot of advice, but I think to whittle it down to like one thing is just take consistent forward moving action daily. The thing I see as the biggest hiccup, especially for people who are not yet working consistently, is the biggest thing that's often holding them back is their mind,
Mhm.
right? Like getting depressed about not having having something or an audition and not knowing how to use their time, and then maybe going into some sort of like negative spin and wasting time and numbing. And I think, you know, when I was 19, I had a conversation with with my agent, Nick Terzian at Nick Terzian Agency. And he sat there and he kind of told me how to book commercials and gave me like basically a little seminar. And I sat in his office and he looked at me and it was really profound. He said, Brianna, the only reason you're not making six figures right now is because of you. And I heard that. And I thought two things. I'm the reason I'm not making six figures. And two, I didn't even know I could make six figures. This is incredible, right? So
Yeah.
it made me think like, okay, well then what can I do? What can I do? And I think again, with that kind of like cancer's victim mentality, we can blame like, oh, well, there's a pandemic and oh, well, we have a strike. I'm like, I created so many things during the pandemic. I mean, that I could with when I wasn't momming it. I created so many things during the strike. I was like, "Oh, we have a strike?" I'm like, "Awesome. I'm not gonna get interrupted by auditions. I am going to just,
Give
like,
all
put
that time.
tons of energy into, other things that I'm doing." And, now I have a podcast that's gonna be launching next month. It's called Manifesting Your Mission with Brianna Brown Keene. I have my coaching business. I have the thriving community that I mentioned with Elizabeth Boykovich. I've rewritten my book multiple times over in the past 7 years just to keep it up to date and, like, and current, and I'm producing a movie with my husband. All these things. I have so many different irons in the fire so that when there's a lull, I have something to put action toward, so I can continue to be creative. And so consistent, going back to what I said about taking consistent action, positive, productive action. So sometimes you need to know when to pivot from one to the other so you're not like, sabotaging opportunities. But, having these other things on the back burner is really important. And also creating your own material. I've produced stage events, I've produced a film, I've produced multiple shorts, I've produced a web series. I mean, I've, when I couldn't get people were like, "Oh, you only do drama. We can't see you in comedy." I'm like, the first part of my resume is comedy. Um, but I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna create a short and show that I can be funny." And so I was like, "Great, I'm gonna do it." And so they said, "See, now there's material of me being funny. Let's go."
Oh my god.
And so, just saying like, "Okay, what can I do? What can I do? What,"
Yeah.
versus like, "I can't do this." And then the other thing I hear people say is like, "I can't do this because of money."
Mm.
And I think that while it's valid, a lot of times it's really about not having proper budget allocation. And I actually get into that in my guidebook too. So like what are my budget priorities? And if I'm saying my business is my priority, I better be investing in my business consistently. And what can I adjust in my budget? A lot of people are really rent poor as actors. And I think that yes, housing is insanely expensive. And if you went somewhere else, like you'd be paying a mortgage payment.
Yeah, exactly.
With your rent. So be smart about it and live way below your means. Have a roommate or two, get a really nice house and rent it. It's often a lot cheaper than, spending a lot of money on a studio or one bedroom.
Yeah.
Like figure it out and stay put so that as rent goes up, you can like have more money to invest. I always was really savvy with that. And I think that, you know, part of why I got ahead was aside from like grit and tenacity, was because I was always like strategic.
Mm.
Always like, well, I need to be able to invest in this and this. I know I will minimally make this much money. So when I have extra, how can I just continue to be investing so I'll then make more money
Absolutely.
instead of wasting it on other things? So that's my long, long advice to you.
No, it's wonderful advice, especially for those who say have saved up quite a bit budgetarily and they're looking to like myself, I took a year off from bartending
Yeah.
to pursue this career a couple of years ago. And I already done, I'd done things before. It was a great career so far, but things just skyrocketed because I stopped blocking myself in and just opened up, to new possibilities, even though
Yeah.
they were scary.
Yeah.
So that's just so pertinent to everything we're going with or going through right now as creatives. And I know we're running lower on time, but I just want to say, like, this has been just delightful to not only hear about your background, but everything else you've done to hopefully inspire more creatives to say, you know what, I wrote that pilot, but what else can I do? Because now I'm just waiting to see if anybody has interest. Like, let's stop waiting.
Yeah, everyone that I know, my husband included, they have like my husband's a director and a producer. I mean, he has like 10 things that he's working on. And
Yeah.
that can't just have one.
No.
'Cause a lot are not gonna go. So or they might start to go, and then the network exec changes, and now it's canned. It's like it's just if you when you're in the business enough, you know you can't just rely on one stream, and if you're just gonna be an actor, or your focus is just being an actor, then, what can you do? And I think that's the bigger thing. What can I do to move this forward today? And if you're going off the pacing of like who your acting people in acting classes, just know you'll probably just be a professional student. So, and that's fine, but you got to be ahead of the game because those are the people that are not even on set all day, right? So it's
Yeah.
like if you think like varsity, JV, sophomore, freshman, like like a lot of the people are like they're not even in the game. And so you're like, okay, let me hone my craft and be great at it, but like to be in the game, you've got to create your own material. To be in the game, if you're not getting opportunities and not crushing auditions or you're not on a network list and you're not, you know, getting offers at this point, like what can I do? And I promise you, just taking that action and like choosing to just learn, you'll get so much further than just waiting for the right audition that you get, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then also, if you do come upon a big sum of money, like with bartending, or if you get, a unicorn commercial, go get a condo and then rent out a room and it's like help yourself out so you're not just wasting money on rent
Yeah.
because it's a big that is the number one thing that I hear actors the reason they can't do certain things is because of money. And so there's a lot of things that I hit on in there with like money, financial intelligence and also like changing money beliefs. And a lot of it has to do with deserving and your relationship to money. So when you shift that, then you can be you have more ability to let more come in. And then when
Mm.
you do let it come in, you don't sabotage it subconsciously by making silly decisions or, you always hear about the person like, "I booked a pilot, and so I'm gonna book a Porsche," and you're like, "Well, that's dumb because that pilot probably will not go, or the season canceled," or like, it's like, hang tight. Hang tight.
I honestly thought that whole thing was gone, by I don't know, 2019, and I just had a friend tell me that the other day. They had booked something and they bought a motorcycle that they did not need. I just said, "Okay, well, good for you. If it makes you happy, good for you." And then I just I just shut up. Yeah, that I think the financial intelligence of it specifically is so important. And I'm definitely sending you my address so I can read this book and
Right.
share it just visually with my friends and say, hey, you you got to read this book. No, that's honestly for anybody, whether, like myself, I'm 10, 12 years in. I have friends who are just starting it now. I think it's so important. But I know we're over time. I do want to say one last thing or ask you one last thing. What is your favorite crafty snack on a set? What's your go-to snack from Crafty?
I gotta be honest, I don't eat it. I
Ah.
like don't eat it. I bring my own food, just because I don't eat it. I mean, I remember when I was on Devious Maids, sometimes they had this thing that one of the castmates, it was like a sandwich, but I think they did it like panini style. No, they did it in like a weird, like hot pockety style. I forget where it's like the
Oh,
edges would
weird.
be crisp or whatever it was. It was like
Yeah.
it was some old school thing, and it had like I think it had like hummus and um I think it might even have a little cheese, and I don't remember what it was, but I remember that was a thing that I was like, "All right, I'll have this every once in a while." But overall, like, you'll see me bringing my lunch bag. Like, I'm shooting Outer Banks in South Carolina right now. Not right this second, but I'm going back again next week.
Oh, cool.
I'm shooting season 4, and I'm going back and forth a lot. And like, I'll go to Whole Foods there and I'll pack up a bag and I'll bring my stuff with me just because I know that most of it is like gonna have too much salt or too much sugar, or it's not gonna be, it's like I'll get all bloated or whatever that. I mean, it's all vanity baloney. Again, being an actor, you got to learn how to be a nutritionist and
Oh yeah.
all the different hats you wear based on whatever your casting is. But yeah, so sorry, I don't have a good one.
No, I feel very seen by your response. I bring protein bars, fruits, some whatever veggies I can take them, toss in the fridge when I'm at the hotel. That's what I do. So I feel very seen and understood.
Yes. Well, I remember shooting in Romania on this movie called Timber Falls, and my friend Josh Randall and we both had to be so ripped. So I had like was working out. I had a super extreme diet at the time. And he and I brought a suitcase full of like protein powder, bars, all the things, and bands so I could be working out in my room or whatever I was doing. And I remember us sitting there toward the end of the shoot, and we didn't neither of us really had much of stuff anymore. We're like rationing with each other, like, I'll trade you a protein bar if you'll give me some of your protein. I mean, I was just like, this is such an actor because there was nothing there. We were in the middle of like who knows where Romania to get what we wanted. So yeah, you need to be that way because sometimes you're going to be on set or go to Panama or whatever, and they're not going to have it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I just got an image of the protein exchange.
Oh, we did. It
Um,
was so weird. It was this weird, like as if we were starving. We were both just trying to be ripped, you know? We were both just like,
yeah.
"I'll give you some of this. I'll get my extra 30 grams of protein right now." I mean, it was so ridiculous.
My God, I love that. No, that's also very pertinent advice for any traveling actor, which all of us are. Um, well, I'm gonna let you go because I know you do have a busy schedule, but I want to say thank you again for coming on to the show. Hopefully in the future we can touch base again, or I might see you on set and just we'll talk about protein over the crafty
So
table.
I'll talk all about it.